Our conversation with Bill Grabowski about his new book, Black Light, casts a pretty wide net in the paranormal spectrum.
I started off with people who were a lot older looking with, I was wondering, I'm here in town and I wondered if you've seen anything during the 2-year span of the phenomenon. And I would say I probably spoke to, it was at least 50 people. Out of those 50, probably 40 at least said they had seen UFOs.
Back to your idea, you had mentioned briefly that you thought maybe this is there were some incident reports, people saw something like a Mothman, other people saw a UFO. Someone in the government thought, aha, this is a great place to test out X, whether it's MK Ultra or pulling their chain or whatever the program would be called. What is your evidence for that? What leads you to the conclusion at least some of this was humans messing around?
Well, the first thing was just where Point Pleasant is located. It's within 200 miles of 3 Air Force bases, Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Lockbourne, which I think now is called Rickenbacker Airfield, outside of Columbus, Ohio, and then Oakdale, which is southwest of Pittsburgh. So that kind of rings a bell right there for aerial activity, especially Wright-Patterson being so close and known for, basically a hive of aerial experimentation. And also the Ohio River access. So they had easy air access, easy water access. And some of the early reports about men in black, for one thing, it wasn't mentioned in Keel's book, and I'm not sure he knew it or not, but he probably did. A lot of insurance offices were visited by men in black, and I found out that insurance offices often have blueprints for local companies. They had blueprints for the nuclear power plant that was going up in Point Pleasant. And it seems that, given this was the Cold War, some of these men in black may have been spies who wanted to look, or at least discredit people who reported them, and hence their bizarre behavior and their stuttering and acting like they're drunk. And the whole thing about where the men in black visited and what was available there, that was kind of a red flag to, just flat out human involvement. And of course, there are a lot of factories around Point Pleasant still today that produced exotic ceramics, metal, and other things used in the defense industry. So as far as the possibility for spying and espionage, it was wide open.
And if it's some outgrowth of MK Ultra, as you postulate, I mean, you don't prove it, but you postulate it, suggest it might be possible, what would be the purpose of that? Just to see if they could do it?
To see if it's possible to do, I guess I would call it mythological engineering, to see the effects on people. And again, I think it started with actual so-called paranormal phenomena, the Mothman sightings, and then could have been further exploited. And another thing is Point Pleasant, is also not very far from the intelligence in Washington, D.C. and in Alexandria, Virginia. Not very far at all, because there was talk of, it could have been in the same study, about trying to cast an image of Jesus on the clouds. They wanted to use this over Cuba to basically freak out people, because obviously a lot of Catholics in Cuba rather, that was mentioned. I think the actual instrument is called a mitralux, which casts an immensely powerful beam and basically any image you want. Which, it sounds almost laughable, but you never know. If people are terrified, the perceptions are heightened and emotions take over, and they can color things, they can project things onto it, which may very well have happened in some of the entity sightings of Mothman and Thunderbirds.
But as you say, that does not explain all of it. It certainly didn't explain it for Keel. A lot of people would have classified him as a ufologist at points in his career. I think he referred to himself as a demonologist. I think he mentioned that in the book. I
Yes.
mean, is that a literal sort of a way? Is that his explanation for paranormal in general? Is that it's demonic?
Well, like a lot of the things Keel said, I think there was a lot more metaphor involved, and not so much literalism. But in his worst moment, when he received these phone calls, and a lot of which were threatening, he said there was definitely a demonic element in how the phenomena affects you. Once you step into the ring, you're part of it. There can be a reflective effect where things come back on you. For instance, he would ask a so-called entity a question, a phone voice. And a lot of the time, he was convinced he was receiving these phone calls from someone in like a post-hypnotic state. Because often they would say, hey, so-and-so is standing here right next to me. Like in the movie where Gordon Sloan's character, played by Will Patton, says, I have instances right here on my phone. They would make claims. And then Keel thought that he was going to lose his mind because some of the things that said to him came true, or they just knew details. It was very difficult to know unless you were someone's mind. They were instantly tuned in. Point Pleasant nearby with people's voices. There was tests of microwave, called microwave hearing, in the late 50s about how to broadcast a voice in someone's head, either for military purposes to give direction or drive people mad. So there is some documentation of it.
What appealed to me about Keel's central sort of message is that he looked at the UFO mystery and saw beyond just nuts and bolts saucers. With the prevalent view then and maybe even now is that extraterrestrials, these are beings from other planets visiting us in craft. And he saw it as something else. And maybe this goes a lot beyond just something as simple as that, which Jacques Vallée has written extensively about it and tying into a lot of other kind of mysteries, other kinds of creatures, that it seems to be some sort of a grand design, sort of almost like a play or a theater to mess with us, either to educate us or to bring us along or just to really pull our chain.
The part about we may never know or we can't know, that's my personal opinion, because look how long it's been studied. Basically, we can come up with theories.
I need to target something.
Very little can be proven. Professor Jacques Vallée, I believe he actually states that he knows the words. This is stage management here.
It's a control system. Yeah, it's a control system.
Theater, frightening theater, and I believe he and Keel pretty much arrived. They pretty much both trashed the extraterrestrial hypothesis in the mid-60s. When they, after extensive research, they came to the conclusion not the. Although Vallée says the craft are physical, they're not real. Our craft is not something physical, but not be real. And he has a more of a, being French, is more of a realistic angle through the Valley series than Keel. But Keel, obviously, I'm not going to say they were pals, but they were definitely on the same page regarding I guess you would call it the psychosocial.
You know, I see these cases, some of the cases were coming up on an anniversary of the Hopkinsville UFO case where these aliens showed up, and it's like a shooting gallery, and it is so preposterous on its face. Some of the stuff that happened at the Utah Ranch, so ridiculous as to you don't even want to mention it. And then, Point Pleasant and some of the experiences there, it is so preposterous and over the top that it's almost designed to look like no one can ever possibly believe this, to stretch the limits of our credulity. Obviously, you've thought about that.
When I first read about Men in Black, for instance, over and over, okay, they have trouble breathing, they make absurd statements, what time is it, what is your time, and, would intelligent creatures do this? And then reading Vallée, where he says, well, hey, maybe there is a reason for this absurd theater, whatever you call it. It's meant to cause cognitive difficulties. It's meant to affect you emotionally. The powerful truths images that are going to sink into you, and you won't be able to forget them. In order to program consciousness heightened evolution. That is part of Valley's theory, the control system hypothesis. I didn't feel most of it, but not so much. Keel's take on it was far darker than Valley. Keel was more about, I don't think they care about it at all. They're just tampering because they can. Not mentioned. Transformative effect. So Valley thought that possibly this external whatever it is, intelligence is actually trying to have an effect on it. But the way we see it is, it's a live wire. If you touch a live wire, you're going to get electrocuted. And the phenomenon can present itself that way and may not even be hostile. It's something beyond we have no model for how to interact with it. And so when we do, it comes out as either terrifying or, on the other hand, has a beneficial effect on people. I come away from it with new analysis. Author Andy Colvin mentioned we live near the Point Pleasant area, and he mentioned acquiring artistic skills after some unusual experiences.
Well, it just seems like in the big picture, the positive me wants to say it's a learning curve of some sort. They're trying to tell us something. We're not quite smart enough to figure it out, but maybe we just need a little more info. The negative part of me says this is a diversion. This is a circus to keep us busy and occupied. It's opium for the masses, keeping us trying to figure out what the twinkly lights in the sky are, while they, whoever they are, carry out whatever it is their agenda might be.
Yeah, I would have to say I'm on that page as well. Because I have the practical side, and then I have the fantastical side of the horror fiction. And those two feed each other. And then I try and back away from both and say, well, how do I feel about this as a human being? I've been asked many times, well, of course you're not amazing. No, I'm not amazing. Because that is like the ultimate cop-out to me. That's like just committing suicide. You can't explain yourself, so therefore you can't rule out an intelligence other than us. And I think we project our despair onto it, our hope onto it, and therefore it manifests the way that it does now. And now with we got the dominating influence of the internet, right, and our collective unconscious or subconscious, it's projecting new fears. We have the
it's the cosmic Rorschach test or something.
What a way to put it. That is exactly it.
You mentioned about the Will Patton character in the movie, the Mothman Prophecies, and I remember in the movie he committed suicide. Was there any suicide? Did any of the witnesses get so troubled that they took their own lives?
The only accounts I know of are those mentioned by Keel in Mothman Prophecies, and I think he also mentioned Disneyland with God. He doesn't name names, of course, but there was suicide, and of course Mary Heyer, the Point Pleasant registered reporter, died sort of suspiciously in 1970, and she'd either just made a phone call or just received one, and she was found dead in her home. And she was that old. I think she was 54, 55.
I mentioned before that that Keel had sometimes referred to himself as a demonologist. And does he mean that in a literal sense of there are demons that intervene in our lives, or did he mean it in a more generic sense that whatever this thing is, this intelligence that intervenes in our lives, that it is evil?
I think he meant that whatever these entities are, that they behave, that their effect on us can be demonic, as in causing terror and seemingly outright hostility, negative influence. I don't think he meant as in devil and reason cause in literal ways. I think he meant it as possibly was meant even in the Bible. These things are negative, and people call them certain things at certain times in our culture.
You speculate on the government, and I'm sort of in the same spot as you, that there is not going to be any big revelation because chances are pretty good they don't know a whole lot more than the rest of us.
That is precisely what I think. That it's been going on far too long of pointing the finger at the government, because it invests them with this godlike power that given how bureaucracies function, it cannot structurally work that way. And plus, if you think of the money that would be required for certain effects that, when you look back on them, they scared a lot of people. Yeah, they sure did. And they probably learned a lot of things. Are they responsible for all of this? No. So the problem now is we have drone technology, which is really confusing the issue of UFOs. And you've probably seen as many videos as I have that look profoundly strange. You look at them again, and then here's further reports that, well, that was actually a new kind of drone. They're being used by people making film. It looks very strange.
I think because of technology, because of CGI, special effects technology available to anyone with a laptop, that UFO video, for all intents and purposes, the evidential value of them are way down.
That's going deeper and deeper. Every time I see new evidence, oh brother, here we go. Images from Mars. Yeah, as far as the UFO footage on YouTube and elsewhere, some of which looks very, very convincing. Probably 99% of it is somebody having a good time, and there are even apps for your phone.
Yeah, the government doesn't have to make it up anymore. The people online are happy to do it and confuse it and muddy the waters all themselves. Yeah, it raises interesting possibilities that the people who are in this kind of business are a lot better at it than we are at ours, and they can see a lot further down the road and what the ultimate goal might be, and preparing us for whatever might still be to come.
But also, no oversight on the budget for depending on what the project might be. People, the public has been very sheepish about accepting the guise of national security. Everything's dangerous now.
I need a target.
But we need
I
this
don't have a
information.
target.
We need to spy on you all the time.
Well, I guess as an example of what Archer was sort of getting at in that last call is they've been seeding this kind of imagery for a long time. Be afraid, be very, very afraid. Give us the authority to do whatever we want. Thank you very much. Once you give up those rights, there's no going back. I think any of those experiences are military, intelligence, MK Ultra type stuff. People are led to believe that they've been. Yeah. You got an example of one that you would say definitely falls in that category?
There was a book that was, I don't want to waste time flipping through it here, but anyhow, it was an individual who said that he was out camping and was hit by a strange light and came to in a blue van, positive with a Navy van, not Navy blue, and was taken to a normal facility somewhere, and then was later visited a psychiatrist. Unfortunately, hypnotic regression is not a reliable tool because it causes confabulation and had a full-blown memory of your typical abduction and examination and trauma that caused.
I'm Connie Lewis. This is Coast to Coast AM. Tim Coleman is who I'm talking about. He's a multi-award-winning documentary filmmaker. Out of the Blue, that is the one. That's the one film to me. That's the way I always express it. Is Out of the Blue is the film that if you're on the fence about UFOs being real or not, this is the one that takes you.
Yeah, that's exactly why we made it, and that was with James Fox and Boris Zubov. We sort of, we shared the directing credit on that because it was kind of a three-man team, and we put it together with something like $20,000, and I think my mum gave me, and we made that one because basically I've been writing about the UFO subject. I've been into the UFO subject like forever. Even when I was like 10 years old. I went to a kind of very strict preparatory school in London. That's the school they send you off to a private school, and there was like they teach you Latin and stuff like that back in those days in England. And they said, I said, I'm not going to learn Latin. I refused to do that. I got all frothy about it. So they said, go and see the art teacher and do a project with her. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to write an essay about the UFO subject. That was at 10 years old. So something was going on there. I had a curiosity that began very early. So that eventually manifested because I tried to get a documentary off the ground in England for ages. So this is way back in the 90s, and I couldn't get anywhere. So that's really why I moved to the States. I thought, well, okay, I'm going to have much, my mother's American, I got a passport, I can live out there. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try and make this film. And I looked at all the UFO documentaries around and they were all pretty rubbish. And then I saw James Fox's UFO City of Denial, which was his first. And I got hold of James and I said, hey dude, this is great. Let's work together. And within 3 years, we had made Out of the Blue, which was the highest rated show in its strand on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was a big success. And
Absolutely.
to this day, I'm just, that's the film I'm pretty much the most proudest of, because we pulled it off on a shoestring. Does that make sense in America? When you have any money?
No, you nailed it.
On a low budget. And it was very successful. And it achieved, as you say, it's like, give this film to a skeptic, because it's got, even Michael Shermer, skeptic, the famous skeptic, gave us a review, very positive review. This is sort of after-death communications. That's one thing when, the dead give you a little sign that they're still around and they want to kind of, tell you that, and in a number of different ways, and that's very fascinating. And there's one of the programs in the Netflix series is on that, Signs from the Dead, which is very wonderful, where this woman gets a cardinal, which she, her mother had. And,
not loiter.
And the very rare bird suddenly appears lands on her shoulder. So you have these wonderful events where, the deceased is just saying, hey, there you go, I'm here. But in the skull experiment, which I'm not sure how familiar your viewers are with. I mean, I specifically... More and
more people talk about it. They really do.
Okay. Yeah, because this happened in like 93 and 98, something like that. 5-year experiment. And in my view, and in the view of the experts who studied it, from the SPR, Society for Psychical Research in England, which has been, like one of the most prestigious organizations investigating paranormal phenomena for over 150 years, they investigated it and they find no evidence of fraud, and they attended sessions, right? So so I was doing it retrospectively. The skull experiment had finished by the time I started filming. So I was doing it kind of like interviewing all the participants and getting their video and footage and stuff like that. And it's unique. And in the words of Montague Keane, who was one of the investigators, he said, like, I've never seen anything like that ever. There's just it provided more paranormal evidence for the existence of an afterlife than any experiment ever conducted in the history of the paranormal. Period.
Yeah. Are you the only one that was able to ever show it to anybody else? Are you the only outlet?
Yeah. We were the only ones to get in there. They allowed us to use it and make the documentary. People have been trying ever since, and they want to make a movie out of it, but so they've signed some deal with some movie company, so they won't let documentary filmmakers make it until the movie's made, if it ever gets made. So we were like super lucky to get in there. I kind of did that off the back of Out of the Blue, so I had to get a bit of, a reputation, so I could, use that to leverage my way in there,
And it worked, huh? It worked.
It worked, yeah. So we were super lucky to get them, and they gave us full access to all their archive. They had 5,000, was it 500 or 5,000? Anyway, 500 hours, I think. 500 hours of recorded audio with spirits who were talking both through the mediums. So this was taking place in a 17th century little farmhouse in Skull, which is a tiny little village in England, and they do it in the basement. And these guys are dedicated afterlife researchers, there's Robin and Sandra Foy, and the Violets, who were the mediums, the two mediums who were like just superstar mediums, just ordinary people who were just like having this amazing gift. And they would try for like a year, sit for 2 hours every week, and nothing would happen for a year, right? So you go to research, and then suddenly the phenomenon started to happen more and more and more, and it just got so amazing that they could sit down and regularly, the spirits would come through, talk to the larynxes of the mediums and go into trance, and then you could have a two-way conversation with a spirit, which is pretty cool. And then later it developed so that the voices just come out of thin air, right?
And then stop.
Yeah, and there was like, okay, so to go back to your question about the apple, these objects, apples that appear, manifest out of nowhere, they had a whole bunch of stuff that would just like appear. And
Just
one of the
fall
most
out of the sky or out of the air.
Sorry?
They would just fall out of the air. Just.
They would literally, yeah, so you're in the sandstorm, you're in darkness, okay, because physical mediumship doesn't work at all when you've got light sources in there. Sometimes you can have a little bit of light, red light, but usually it's in darkness because the energies are destroyed by normal daylight or electric light. But in the skull experiment they had luminous strips on stuff, and they also had these little kind of orb-like things they called spirits. It would zip around the room, and that would illuminate things, so you could actually see stuff going on. But the apple would literally, you could hear a thump on the table, and there was an object which could be a coin, a piece of jewelry, penknife, and in one case, like they had like 50 or 60 different objects appear out of nowhere. And they said that they weren't stolen, they didn't steal them from somebody. They belonged to the deceased or what have you, they were taken. And they would often have special significance to the sitters in the seance, okay? And in one case, they had a newspaper, right, from 1945, I think, like pristine newspaper that dropped on the seance table. And it was very interesting because it had an article in it on Helen Duncan, who's a very famous English medium, who suffered enormously for her mediumship, right? She was such a successful medium that she was able to, she had a communication with a sailor who had died on a ship, this was during the Second World War, and who communicated with her. And this was before the authorities had said that the ship had sunk. So she knew about this before the authorities released the information. And so they were really anxious about that because that was like, what kind of spying country? It's dangerous for national security. And so she was prosecuted under this ridiculous thing called the Witchcraft Act.
Yes.
Gone back centuries. And it's still in activation, And so she was put in prison and, oh my God, she suffered horribly. So she had this. She probably, that's right, she told them that she had apported this newspaper into the seance room as a way of saying, hey, look, it's me, and, this is kind of like what happened to me. And the interesting thing was they had the paper analyzed, right, because anyone can, like, mock up a newspaper and print it on modern newspaper. They had the print newspaper actually analyzed by the leading paper specialists in the world, and they showed that it was the paper from 1944 that you could only get that time because they only had they didn't have chemicals that you couldn't get because of the war shortages. So it was a genuine article. It had been made in 1944, and then boom, out of it comes out of nowhere. Now that is what's called a permanent paranormal object. It's definitive proof of a paranormal event, which in this case is associated with coming from the afterlife. Apport means it comes from the French apporter, to carry or to transport. Right. So it's what that describes what these events are.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought you said apple. It's that beautiful accent of yours. So I remember like what looked like plants to me. Those looked like plants.
Okay. Yeah. So I covered the soul experiment, and I also covered a bit about ITC, Interstellar Transcommunication, which all your viewers will know about, listeners will know about. But this was a particularly interesting thing with this guy called Marcello Bacci, who was a medium and the leading exponent of direct radio voice, which is where a purported spirit voices come through the radio, okay? So we went down to Grosseto in Italy to film him, and he has a center there where people from all over the world turn up, and usually parents who've tragically lost their children and they want to communicate with their child, right? And so this center is covered with pictures of all these children who have actually come through his radio. And that's just so miraculous. And then, we spoke to some of the mothers who'd spoken to, the voices had come through the radio, and the mothers had recognized their child, and they just get so much solace, so much relief from that experience. They burst into tears, and it's like it was really emotional. But what happened? And we've got that. We had that. We got footage because when we went to that event with the radio, it was like a 2-hour event. Lots of people in there, and nothing happened, right? Because he just tunes the radio in between stations and gets static, and then something hopefully comes through. But nothing happened. So I thought, oh dear, I've come all this way and I haven't got anything. But he said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll go next door and we'll have a seance. So I said, oh, I didn't even know you do seances. So I said, yeah, cool. Can we film it? We've got night shot cameras, so we can film it in the dark. And he said, yeah,
Nice.
okay. So we put the cameras on. They started the seance, and he said, right, you've got to switch the cameras off. And I secretly kept one running because I wasn't gonna miss it.
Oh, bad boy.
I'm so glad I did because
Yes.
we captured some amazing stuff coming in. So I was in the seance, so that's the first one I've ever been to, right? And first of all, the table was this very heavy oak table. It's just, you're in the dark, right? But I have my hand on the table, and the table just sort of lifts off the ground as if it, weighs nothing and starts floating in space, yeah? And then I was sitting on the floor, and I felt all these things fall on me. And when the lights came on, the entire seance room was just covered in flowers. It was like somebody transported like a flower shop, the contents of a flower shop into this room.
Yes, that's what I remember. Yes. Yeah. It's like, holy cow.
I know. It just completely blew me away. Now, obviously, skeptics are going to say, oh, well, somebody just came in the room and threw flowers, right? Because it's in the dark. But you've got to remember that Barchi had been doing this for 40 years. He'd been investigated by a bunch of scientific investigators. He never asked money for his work. He's never accepted donations. And, he got all these amazing results. And the scientists who investigated him have never found any evidence of fraud, ever. So he's the real...
And you were there, too. What did you see? I mean, I know you would check it out. So you checked it all out.
I checked it all out. There was a guy... so the voices come through, right?
Right.
And in one case, a young girl had died. It's a teenage girl that died in a car accident, and her father was there. I wasn't there at the time. I just got this recording, and so the father had recorded her voice when it came through the radio, and she recognized his deceased daughter. Okay, they then took a recording of her when she was alive, and they used this FBI endorsed software because a voice is like a fingerprint. Everybody's voice is different, right? Mm-hmm. Biometric identification. They use it to save, for sort of security, right? So they ran it through the software, and the two voices, when compared, were 98%. There was a 98% comparison, which is enough to say it's the same voice. So the deceased voice came through, the living voice, they were identical.
When I just saw all those plants, I just remember all those plants. That's why I thought you had said apple earlier. I'm like, I guess I missed the apple, but of course I would think that could happen since I saw all those like plants and flowers and everything that came down. And the table, yeah, you knew that the table was heavy and it was just moving around. It was like it was crazy in so much activity. It was, I've never seen anything like it.
If we talk about, go back to the skull experiment, which is so amazing. They also had levitations and stuff like that. I can tell you a couple of stories about that. So in the States, they did seances in four or five different countries, and they did some in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. They did this really remarkable thing where, to me, it was one of the most impressive. Well, they had spirit materializations. They had like a hand that would materialize in the seance room and float around and touch people, and so people could actually feel this disembodied hand. Now that's pretty remarkable. That doesn't normally happen in the seance rooms. People would actually see this hand, but they could also touch it, and it felt warm to the touch and just like a normal human hand. And yet it's being manifested from the spirit world, which I find remarkable. And then Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who you probably know all about his work, right? He was there at the seance room, and the sort of the spirit said to him, he said, "Hand, can I touch you?" And the woman, it was actually, there was a woman's hand. She said, "Yes, you can." And he said, "Oh, why can I only touch a hand?" They said, "Look, it's hard enough getting a hand materialized. You want the whole body, so just be happy with the hand, right?" So, well, they got more. They got the Robin and Sandra Floyd, their mother and Robin's father and mother and sister, who are all deceased, eventually manifested in full physical form in front of them in the seance room.
Oh, my.
And he could converse with them, and he could touch them. I mean, that is as good as it gets in physical mediumship.
Wow. Oh, knew Bud Hopkins, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Did you know Jacobs, David Jacobs? Yeah. Okay. Loved him, one of my good friends. Also knew Bud at the very end of his life. But Jacobs would say, and I know that he probably said it because of Bud as well. They were best of friends, right? And did their research. They could even, they could think separate of each other too, but I believe they both agreed on this. They're pretty much right on the same line with each other for sure. But Jacobs had said to me at one point, he said, Dr. David Jacobs, you guys, the alien abductions is what we're discussing here, is he had said, I wouldn't be surprised if all the things that people experience are aliens doing the talking, doing any of the touching, any of the things that people might think is a ghost or might think is this or that or this. So when people experience ghosts in homes, or any type of thing, maybe even like the skull experiments or anything like you've been talking about, he would say it's a good possibility it could be the ET.
Nah,
what do you think of that?
For a minute.
No, that was one of their thoughts. That was one of their thoughts.
I mean, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But, what? Obviously, you're getting a variety of different things. I mean, the majority of things going on in seances are communication with dead people. Okay. In the skull experiment, they did a sort of kind of video thing where they were actually able to get sort of images sent from the afterlife, if you like, and they got this one image of this kind of what they call blue, and he was like a kind of grey alien. He looked like that, except he was blue, and it was his head. So he came in. They had voices coming in saying,
"Well, there's an alien right there, dude."
Yeah, okay, sure. I mean, they can come in. They've obviously got interdimensional capacities. So
and it was interesting looking.
That's
too.
No problem. You've got aliens come in, but they're not masquerading as spirits.
But he's saying that the aliens could masquerade as anything you want, just so you believe.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. And he, right? Because if that makes it easier for you to handle, then that's what makes it easier for you to handle.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard that one. That's super interesting.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, instead of it being an owl or something, this kind of like whatever they want to present to you so you don't get freaked out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Personally, I would like to see them as they actually are. I mean, I'm totally up for that. You know what I mean? I want to see what these beings actually look like and interact with them.
Stick with me, baby. I'll show them to you. So you ready? You ready for it?
No, I'm getting ready.
I know, it's true. I've seen some crazy things out there,
I'd love to talk to you about that more another time. You're the expert on that one. The abduction, I kind of like dip my toe into, and I knew Bud very well. So, he was partnered with Leslie Kane, who's my best friend.
That's right.
And we collaborated on a lot of stuff, right? And she was behind the Netflix series. So I would sit down with Bud. I stayed in his apartment in New York, and we would talk for hours and hours about abduction. But he went right down the rabbit hole there with that one, and I didn't go down as far because I'm just still confused about what's really going on with abduction. It's such a complicated phenomenon.
Jorge Martin has been a journalist for more than 30 years. He specializes in UFO and alien phenomena, writing about those from the vantage point of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean.
Great type aliens, humanoid.
I need
coming up from the sea and going into the lagoons in the island, coming up from the lagoons, and many other situations. The policemen there, the state policemen, the municipal policemen, the government officers of the municipality of the island. Everyone there had seen this, but they were afraid to talk about it before I went there because of the struggle they had with the U.S. Navy, and they were afraid that, something could happen. So they prefer not to talk about it. But then they opened up, and all this information came out. I was in this book fair in the year 2002, presenting the book, and while doing that, I met a lawyer, Juan Maribras, and Mrs. Providencia Trabal. He was also presenting a book he had made on his political ideas about the situation in Puerto Rico. And we began talking about the situation of the UFOs. Mr. Maribras had to leave for a moment, and I continued talking on with Mrs. Providencia Trabal, who was very interested in the UFO matter because she had had experiences herself, something I didn't know about. And then all of a sudden she said, hey, you know something? Juan Mari is very interested in this matter of the UFOs. And
Juan Mari is who? Who is that?
Juan Mari Mabras is the lawyer here in Puerto Rico who was a very prominent political leader advocating for independence for Puerto Rico, and also a socialist leader here in the island. And he was a personal friend of Fidel Castro. He visited very frequently the island of Cuba, and Mrs. Trabal was a very close person, very close to Mr. Juan Maribras. And she told me Maribras was very interested in this matter. And I said, really? And she said, yes, because he, on one occasion we were talking, and he just talked about the situation, and he was very interested. And he told us that Fidel Castro had told him something very important. He said, Fidel Castro talked to me about the UFOs and aliens, things like that. And she said, yes. He told us that on one occasion they were talking in Cuba, and Fidel Castro disclosed to him that on one occasion before the fall of the Soviet Union, he had visited Cuba. I believe, George, that it could have been in the 60s, at the beginning of the 60s. And he was taken by the Soviet authorities to this military base, which I believe must be in Astrakhan, in the Shiktor area. And he was shown in a special laboratory that they had there in a building, a place there where they had this craft. He was shown a flying saucer type craft, and allegedly, by what Maribras said, the corpse of this pilot, okay, and he told us